Live from Newark, New Jersey, also the place of birth of myself, Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Green Rush Live, another Friday afternoon business of cannabis talk show that we do every single Friday live on the Pro Cannabis Media Network on all of those social media platforms out there. You know, your YouTubes, your Facebooks, your LinkedIn Lives, and of course our Roku channel, PCM TV, and our Apple channel, PCM TV. I'm at the Athletes in Cannabis Conference here in Newark, New Jersey. And earlier, when they had their little breakout session with some of the athletes, I actually met an old friend, if you will, former #1 draft pick of the New England Patriots. Dominique Easley is here. And Reggie Grant, who is one of the co-founders of the Athletes in Cannabis Conference, along with Jeff Walter, was also in on this little breakout session, and they all talked about their cannabis stories, coming out of the cannabis closet, getting away from opioids, and also how to get into the business. And that was the opening discussion, the opening breakout room that I took part in earlier today. Now, I'll be back here tomorrow, and I'll do some interviews with some of the vendors here. But as you can tell, I'm actually at a very special booth at the Most Cannabis Group booth. And Claudia Post happens to be right with us. Say hi, Claudia. Hi, Claudia. I knew she'd do that. And Claudia, like Josh and like Rick, are both correspondents for We Talk News, which, as you know, always follows this Green Rush Live show at about 6 o'clock. So rather than going back and forth with Rick and Josh, I'm just going to wrap this baby up, and I'm going to say, take it away. And I know both you guys will do a great job. Rick Thompson, Josh Kincaid, I'm not going to sign off. Reporting live from Newark, New Jersey, I'm Jimmy Young. Back to you, Rick and Josh.
Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow.
Welcome to the Green Rush, the business of cannabis. Wasn't that a fun little intro from our founder, Jimmy Young, there in New Jersey? The Green Rush is, of course, a 2-hour weekly live cannabis business talk show produced by Pro Cannabis Media. We broadcast every Friday from 4 to 6. We discuss news, issues in the cannabis market, and every week we conduct a deep dive into specific topics of the industry. Today's subject, athletes in cannabis. I'm Rick Thompson, and I'm joined by Josh Kincaid. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks, Rick.
Josh, tell people a little bit about yourself as we introduction.
Start with the my own podcast, The Talking Hedges Cannabis Business Podcast, but been in the cannabis industry for a little over 9 years. But actually, as an athlete myself, I was injured, was supposed to go play college football, couldn't do it. Recently had surgery just this last August, still going with the same issue, same problem. So interested to see, from these athletes today, like Anna, how she uses cannabinoids, for example, and if it was able to maybe extend her career, and maybe I can learn a little bit from her.
Fantastic. By way of introduction, I'm Rick Thompson. I'm currently the executive director of the Michigan chapter of the National Association for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. But I'm also on the board of the Redemption Foundation, Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition, and I own the Michigan Cannabis Business Development Group too. Plus, I co-host Jazz Cabbage Cafe and several other broadcasts here from where I'm at in Michigan. And we were very happy at the Green Rush to be able to offer for you today as our first guest, Anna Simmons. Anna is the program manager at the Etheridge Foundation, a board member for Athletes for Care. And as Josh mentioned, she is a professional athlete herself. Anna, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I just want to, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My last name is Symonds. It rhymes with diamonds. I always had to tell the announcers that so they could remember because everyone wants to say Simmons, but thanks for having me on.
I think Dan French wanted me to look bad, so he didn't tell me that in advance. Thank you, Anna. I appreciate your tolerance for my badness.
It's common.
So tell us a little bit about the Etheridge Foundation.
The Etheridge Foundation is a nonprofit founded by the legendary musician Melissa Etheridge. And our mission is to support research into plant-based and nature-based medicines for opioid use disorder. And so it's a pretty specific purpose. Sadly, the foundation was created because Melissa lost her son to opioids almost 2 years ago. And so in response, she had this outpouring of support from fans, and she wanted to change the system because we know that conventional treatments are not working for so many people. We need more tools in the toolbox, and we need more effective tools that treat the whole person and the root causes. So I'm really excited to be doing that work on behalf of the foundation.
Well, we did mention that you're a professional athlete with the USA Rugby Women's Premier League, but talk about Athletes for Care for just a moment, if you would, please.
Sure. Yes. Athletes for Care is another nonprofit that I'm involved with. I've been an athlete ambassador for 4 years or so, 5, and then am now on the board as well. And so what that CARE stands for is Community Advocacy, Research, and Education. And so this is a community for mostly retired professional athletes to come together and advocate, educate the public, and support research into, again, plant medicines for our wellness and for the good of all. And so it really originally started with some athletes who wanted to spread the message about cannabis and who said, now that I'm retired, I want to go out there and tell the truth about what is helping my wellness. And so many people really wanted to share the positive transformations they'd had when they were able to begin using cannabis as part of their therapeutic regimen, and for, that to be our right to use the medicine of our choice, that it's effective, has low side effects, et cetera. And so we joined our voices together, and we're pretty active in activism and all kinds of events.
Now, I'm going to ask you about your use of cannabis and cannabinoids during your playing time. And I know Josh has some questions also too, but during your professional days, was there a time when you turned to cannabis medicines for treatment for the various illnesses that you suffered?
For sure. And I just want to add one little side note here. The Women's Premier League is still in the process of fully professionalizing. Women's rugby in the US is in the fight to, side note here, the women's get the funding that it needs to be really, we're kind of where women's soccer was 20 years ago. So we're playing at the top level. We're expected to perform. And yet we're still working all that. And the league is in the midst of a big investment round right now. If anyone's interested, you should go check that out. But so that said, luckily the league has never subjected us to drug testing. There is, if you want to play for the national team, there's some restrictions there. And there's also discrimination if they know you're a cannabis user. But for me, I always used cannabis with the more of the recreational mindset since I was a teenager. And of course, in sports, it was so strongly discouraged as like, that's a drug. You're harming yourself and your body. And but drinking was always fully accepted and embraced. And so that was always a bit weird. And it got weirder as I got older. And I was like, wait a minute. I've used pot. It's really not, anything like the things that you see with alcohol. And so as I got older and I struggled more with the pains that don't go away, you have injuries that never go back to how they were before, and recovery and all those things, I began to use cannabis more strategically for things like sleep and pain management and particular injuries. I hurt my back in 2013. And so that's when I really got smarter about it and more, really more therapeutically targeted.
Josh, go ahead if you had some questions.
I was just curious about how athletes can deal with it now. I mean, knowing it's sort of like, CBD was that gateway. Now everybody knows they've maybe gone to THC or some kind of 1-to-1 ratio. If women, for example, are playing in that rugby premier league and maybe they get invited to the national league or maybe the Olympics, is rugby in the Olympics?
Yes, rugby sevens is in the Olympics. Yeah.
How are then you able to continue to use that as medication if there's such a bias on that? You can't. I mean, if they even know you're a spokesperson, I would imagine there's going to be some backlash.
Absolutely. I know a player who was in the national team pool from a cannabis legal state and was working in the industry, wasn't even an outspoken advocate or anything, but had a job in the cannabis industry. And they told her, well, it's the team or your job. You can't work there and be on this team. And so she chose her job, which good for her, but that's really hard to walk away from that because for most players, that's the pinnacle to play for your country, in our sport and in rugby. And so, so it is hard. And I've connected with the national team staff before and offered to provide education about CBD in particular, because it could be helping our athletes so much with way fewer side effects than some of these other prescription things. And this was a few years ago, but I got like, no, thanks, we're not interested. And their blanket policy is we don't let the athletes use CBD because it could be contaminated with THC. And products aren't reliable. And the thing is, because they're drug tested, they go by WADA standards. It wouldn't be a good thing to have a positive test. It would affect the whole team. It's not good. I understand they can't risk it, but at the same time, it's a really, closed-minded and it's really outdated way of looking at medicine and wellness. And performance. And so it just underscores why we need to change the rules with WADA and why Athletes for Care has been advocating for that for several years now.
Could you explain what WADA is real quick? I know you mentioned it several times.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the World Anti-Doping Agency. And then they set the policies for various states, like USADA is the US Anti-Doping Agency, and different countries, different leagues.
Thank you.
Yet you still have the MLB and National Hockey League that don't really test all that much for cannabis. And you see Melissa Etheridge on the cover of Dope magazine a couple of years ago, no real negative pushback or criticism for that. At what point will the major leagues for football, for example, when will the National Football League stop drug testing, and when will it just be normalized like CBD? I know Athletes for Care. I'm familiar with them in the Panther group, and a lot of athletes within there. They're all waiting patiently. No one's holding their breath though. So where's the hurdle, and when is the solution?
Well, my understanding of the NFL and from what I've heard from retired players, is that they are just a very combative employer. Mm-hmm. So for them, it's all about the contract. And if they know there's something that players want, they're going to demand concessions. It doesn't matter about is this right or wrong? Is this best for people's health? It's a business deal. And so, and I mean, the UFC would be similar, other leagues. But with the NFL in particular, it's been this sticking point, and really that it's going to come down to some kind of, trade-offs, it's a business deal for them. They might talk about player welfare and health, but I don't know if anyone really believes that. So I'm pretty skeptical of that. That's any kind of motivation for them. That's more of a window dressing for their interests.
Mm-hmm. ownership versus the players union is a familiar confrontation that we've seen in sports all the time. And unfortunately, the health and wellness of the athlete sometimes does become one of those bargaining chips that ownership uses in order to, like you said, gain concessions during contract negotiations from the players. Major League Baseball just had a lockout this year. These are never amicable relationships. And when you throw in something as controversial as cannabis medicines, then it just becomes even more of a confrontation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Anna, I'm curious, would you still be playing? Do you think, would it have extended your career? I'm taking a poll today.
Uh-huh. So it did extend my career. I retired last year at the age of 40. So I got some really good years I got 20 years career. And I mean, I think that's pretty good. You don't see too many other players. And then especially when you're running around against 18-year-olds and stuff, it's pretty exhausting. So you really, but cannabis absolutely extended my career and my level of performance because it gave me a pain management solution that was gentle and anti-inflammatory without negative side effects, with only positive ones that sort of supported my overall wellness. For me, that was like really crucial in being able to get, especially those last few good years of playing.
My niece played rugby for Colgate, so I know exactly how, and that was just a couple of years. You've got 20 years in the industry. Good for you. Good for you. What is your preferred method of treatment? Oftentimes topicals are taken, but sometimes people try to treat the entire body with ingestibles. What's your method of treatment?
Yeah, I mean, I use a variety of things, but for like right after a game or practice, I'm usually smoking flower. And I'm really particular about the source, knowing it's organically grown and who grew it and then those kinds of things. But for me, it's reliable, it's effective, it's predictable, and it offers that relief. And I don't need like a tremendous amount. And that's the other good thing about smoking is you can feel, quickly when you reach the level that you need for muscle relaxation, pain relief, all those things. But that said, I do also use topicals. I will use ingestibles like edible type products, tinctures. I think that, topicals can be really great for sort of some localized relief. But if you really want that like systemic anti-inflammatory effect, you have to take something in, that'll go throughout your body and your bloodstream. So really, I kind of just depends on my needs. A little of everything.
Beautiful to have a variety of products available to satisfy whatever you need, right?
Absolutely.
In what state do you normally acquire your cannabis?
Well, I lived in Oregon for many years, and that's where I played rugby. But then last year I moved to Hawaii. So I am now we only have medical cannabis here. So I am a medical card holder here in the state.
Do you find it better? I know you talked about organic cultivation and being able to trust the source. Do you find that the regulated marketplace satisfies your needs, or do you go to a more personalized relationship with a specific grower that you're familiar with?
In Oregon, there is it's a wonderful, sophisticated market because there's been a medical cannabis market since the mid 90s. And so it's a mature industry or segment, of wellness, and people have reputations. It's developed, products are very good, very high quality, versus I think out here, I think a personalized approach is maybe a little better because there are so many restrictions. The laws here aren't very good. There's a limited number of suppliers, and you are only allowed to grow indoors, which is crazy here because the climate is wonderful, the sun is powerful, and electricity is very expensive. So then you're growing, and you need so much HVAC for the humidity. So, I mean, out here it's a different beast, but but in Oregon, I still have, I still have my favorite farms and growers over there.
You'd imagine that being closer to the equatorial region, Hawaii's light spectrum would be just so advantageous to cultivating cannabis. I mean, almost everything else grows wonderfully in Hawaii. So,
well, it does. And I think there's a lot of off-grid cultivation here, but their regulatory system is very, they use that law enforcement argument where, well, if we let people grow it outside, then what's going to happen? They'll just be growing it outside. Well, they're already doing that, and they've been doing that for decades. And, there's a reason. There's classic varieties that come from here, but, it's a work in progress.
I was expecting easy access in Maui for a wedding about 5 or 6 years ago. And I went up to some random people and asked them if they had some. And they asked me if I was, the feds or cops or whatever, nope, just looking for Maui Wowie or whatever's out here. So it's very kind of conservative. Not like Seattle where you just assume everybody smokes. Question for you, Anna, though, when you were in the locker room, did you ever advocate or hear other people talk about alternative pain management? And was cannabis sort of like verbally passed around, or how did other people manage their pain?
Yeah, well, our team, my team, ORSU, the Oregon team, we're very cannabis friendly. Coming out of Portland, Oregon, we have multiple people on the team who work in the industry, who are very knowledgeable. And we have a lot of connoisseurs as well, people who enjoy cannabis and people who definitely use cannabis therapeutically. And so we're kind of on the edge of things that way. And then maybe the California teams are behind us. But on our team, it's a lot of the team leadership, the senior players are part of that cohort. So we really set the tone. There isn't, a new coach comes in and we're like, hey, this is the way it is, so don't try to change that. And that's been really positive for us. Part of the culture of our team is that we are educated on plant medicine and on cannabis. But for other teams, they're not necessarily. And I think our team has a reputation for it, and other teams will seek us out. We know who the people are on the other teams who like cannabis and use it, and they come hang out with us after the game. And so we've, after the national championships in 2016, I remember one of the MVP type players from the team who won the national championship that year sought us out for the post-game pain relief, but was like, I got to keep this quiet.
I just love the thought that you'd sit the coach down, lay a dab rig on the table and say, look, here's how we're going to give. This is how it's going to be, sir.
It's not quite to that level, but it is, we're pretty, our league was really grown. It was player created. And, back in 2010, I think 2009. And so, we really are the drivers of the organizations.
I think that's really a huge advantage, right? Being a player created league as opposed to being a billionaire created league where they want to micromanage and control every single thing. And you have rules that are coming from the bottom up as opposed from the top down, right?
It is a double-edged sword. Each team has their own culture, and ours we are a very player-led team. It's just, it's the double-edged sword of not having a lot of resources. So on the plus side, you get to set the tone and make some of these decisions, you as the team. But then on the other side of things, not having the money, having to constantly fundraise. We're a nonprofit organization. It's just a lot on top of playing and performing.
I'd love to see a team come out with, tie-dyed uniforms, just running around every often.
I would love that too. Actually, our team, I think, we were definitely the first in the league. We had a couple sets of jerseys that are sponsored by, we have a cannabis farm that sponsored a summer set of jerseys, and a topical company that did another set. So we're actually wearing those logos on the field.
That's great.
So Hawaii market now, is it kind of uniform across all islands? Because I'm curious, we have one of the larger, I'm in Washington State, we have one of the larger ferry systems in the world. You can't, like in Alaska, there's issues with all the island chains and air, with the FAA. So there's a lot of regulatory issues where you're at. How do people get their cannabis, and what's the scene look like?
So the scene is pretty restricted. They limit the number of licenses for growers and dispensaries quite a bit. So some islands, I mean, there's like 1 or 2 dispensaries on the whole island, generally speaking, for most of the islands. And then as far as travel, that's a tricky one. I think I read something about this and I promptly forgot it, but it was like, you're within the state, so it should be legal for you to fly, but then that's still federal airspace. It's federal facilities when you go in the airport, so that's not legal. And I think the upshot was like, it should be legal because it's within the state, but it's not technically legal, so it's discouraged. I think people make their own personal choices about that kind of thing.
So really, it comes up to the individual entrepreneur's tolerance, right? Or their willingness to support our industry, right?
I mean, as far as, oh man, on the commercial level, I think maybe you have to have your grow facility on an island and sell it all there, or maybe you would have to take it by boat, but that seems wild because the islands are not that far apart, but the water in the channels between them is like notoriously rough. So
I think that's also covered by federal, because we have water here, like the Puget Sound. We were going to do cannabis cruises, and then that's also covered by the U.S. Coast Guard.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, so I actually haven't delved that far, but I think unless they have they've worked something out with the feds commercially, which I wouldn't imagine they did, because we know the federal government doesn't care about the cannabis industry. But yeah, so it's a very interesting place to be a consumer and a patient and in the industry.
You've participated in international sports as well. What's your experience been with athletes from other nations and their cannabis exposure?
Oh, it varies a lot. I mean, the stigma against cannabis is even stronger in some countries where you would think maybe they would know better. But for example, like Australia, cannabis is very stigmatized. It's treated like the same as meth legally, and it's regarded similarly, and it's like run by gangs and stuff. It's just, but they have medical cannabis, and it's slowly gaining a bit more traction and acceptance, but there is this widespread social stigma that this is a drug, and this is we don't talk about it, that's dangerous kind of thing. There's a lot of curiosity around it, and people do use it, but it's harder to access there. The quality is not as high from my experience, and then, even similar in New Zealand, although I would say more people are consuming there and the quality is probably higher. But it has the same kind of stigma that's had in the US, but even if you go back, some decades, they're a little behind on that. And it's not people's fault. It's just the result of all that propaganda that has been really pushed for decades.
Yeah, the war on drugs was an international phenomenon, not just an American thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very much so. So what's your hope for the future of athletics and the integration of cannabis medicines? If you had your ideal scenario 5-10 years down the road, what would that look like?
Wow. This is my hopes and dreams. I want medicine to become more integrative, meaning like holistic, looking at the whole person. It's not just chemical inputs and outputs. It's looking at everything that's tied together with your physiological functioning. You can't separate your mental and emotional processes. And some people would argue, your spiritual aspects. I mean, these things are all inseparable, and yet our medicine treats them as separate things. And I think a lot of athletes are struggling with that. And we look at, say, mental health as this separate domain. Oh, I'm struggling with that. Well, that affects your physiological health and vice versa. And so if we open the gates, we need to legalize cannabis. We need to really invest in the research so that we're understanding the potential to help with the neuroprotection. Head injuries are a huge issue for so many sports, and brain health. So we're understanding how to protect and support our brains, and support our endocannabinoid system. So we're balanced, we're healthy, we're resilient. And I think so that underlying stress support systems, that supports all those domains, the mental, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual.
And we're just about out of time on this particular segment, but we'd like to invite you to stay for the next half an hour. Darren McCarty, who's a 4-time National Hockey League champion, will be on as well too. And we're a little overdue for our break. Josh, did you have any final questions for Anna before we go to break?
Didn't. I thought it was a great segment. Hope she sticks around.
Fantastic.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us here at Green Rush Live.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. Going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
And welcome back to the Green Rush, the business of cannabis. I'm Rick Thompson, along with co-host Josh Kincaid. The Green Rush is a 2-hour weekly live cannabis business talk show produced by Pro Cannabis Media. We broadcast every Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard, where we discuss news issues in the cannabis market. And each week we have a deeper dive into specific topics of the industry. This is our second interview of our Athletes in Cannabis program. And I'm very pleased to announce Darren McCarty will be joining us for the second segment. Darren, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you, Josh, for having me. Appreciate not only our friendship way, but what you do for the plant.
Appreciate you saying so. Thank you. Darren, you are such a multi-talented individual. As far as cannabis goes, we should talk a little bit about your cannabis businesses, and then we'll talk about CTE and some of the other things that you may have experienced, as well as how you use cannabis to mitigate those issues. You've got DarrenMcCarty.com. You've got your line with Pincana. You have so many different things going on in cannabis. Can you just give us an overview of what you have happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the Darren McCarty brand, which I'm proud to announce, or letting me say this, is that there's changes being made. And yes, my relationship in the past with Pincana, and I would never close any door, but the Darren McCarty brand, myself, is exploring and putting it out there right now, new options. In my world, it's called a free agent. But I'm looking, and so many things have changed in the last couple of years. And I think just the direction that I want to go to get this plant, and the big thing for me and the Darren McCarty brand, and why I started, the first product that I ever released was a CBD roll-on, right, a topical for pain. To really, my focus is on pain relief and sleep. And so what I've been able to do, and God bless everybody up at Pincana that has helped me, from Brent's to Matt's to Dave's to Brian's to everybody who's put the blood, sweat, and tears in to make the medicine that works. But now you run into issues of getting the medicine out there, because I come to this plant not only as a former athlete with pain issues, sleep issues, but I'm an alcoholic. And without this plant, I would not be alive. 11/11/15 is my sobriety date. I used to be 280 pounds. My blood pressure was 265 over 165. If I drank another drop of alcohol, I think my liver would have exploded. But through the love and support and the care of the caregiver program in Michigan, and through Rick Simpson, our RSO, I did a detox on that for a week. That was purging, and I got the physical addiction away. So I realized that there's a lot of things to combat. So I'm a big proponent of that. The easiest thing is to see the picture behind me, and everybody asks, what is that? And I said, that is a photo that I got. It's a 6-foot tall one that's painted of me climbing the glass after we won the Stanley Cup in '97 to share with the fans. That's what it's all about now, because I've hung that jersey up, but I've taken the wing wheel off and I put the plant there. And I will protect this plant as much as I protected any of those teammates, because it's about the truth and it's about you having an option. So that's why where I'm at this point, it's so important to have alliances, allegiances, education, like personally to everybody out there. Rick Thompson plays a huge part in my education and my recovery. Him and Jamie Lowell, where they're the, for lack of a better term, it's the two guys in the Muppets that sit up and they make fun of everything. That's how I look at these guys. These are the OGs to me for education. Why? Because they show us, what we're fighting for and why we're fighting for it, and to give everybody an option. That's what it's about. So the brand in itself, where if you can find it throughout this great state, it makes it sad to me that I can't say, where are you? And I can tell you exactly where to get the product, right? And that's an issue. So me being me, it's bigger than anything else, but I'm looking for conversations. I tell everybody now, throw an email to nick@darrenmccarty.com. That's the easiest way to do it. Because as much as everything's moving forward nationally, my priority is the people in this state. And I want to do laps of this state and make sure that this state is a leader in cannabis. And you know what I want, Rick, is I want people to know me more for what I do for this plant than any of those 4 championships that I'm super proud of. Right. And that's just me being me. I've always tell everybody I'm going to be the first pro hockey player with 4 cups and a cannabis cup. You know, that's my next goal when I get things right. So it's living this plant and for other people to know that they have the option. Because why? Because at one point on November 10th, 2015, Darren McCarty didn't think that he had an option or a way to live. If that is you, so I come with the addicts, and that's why the CBN is so important, the CBD for pain. Hey, yes, I'm flower power all the way, right? That's why we're revamping, and if you can see right there, that'll be the new gourmet Darren McCarty premium cannabis, and it's the only time you'll ever see PC behind my name, premium cannabis. So there's a lot to be done. There's a lot that everybody's doing their best, but at the end of the day, it's about this plant that saved my life. So how can I serve this plant to the best of my ability?
Well, Darren, you were certainly an ambassador for the plant before you became involved with PinCanna. I can testify to that. But you also made it was important to you when you first launched your product line to have something that even a new cannabis user would be able to utilize. So you had some very low dose THC products to help people get into the industry and to discover exactly what worked for them, giving more options, which you've mentioned several times. That's important to you, isn't it?
It really is, Rick, and it's important because I look at this as a medicine. I tell everybody I'm never high. I'm always fully medicated. Then it's for your safety, right? So if you're like that, but it's important because as you get into this plant, right, the biggest thing to me is CBN, and the fact of to be able to combine CBN and CBD and allow people to go to sleep. And I'm talking people that haven't had a night's sleep in years and years to even military guys that suffer PTSD. This stuff works. But as far as the flower and stuff, people hear the word ensemble and entourage as far as effects. Well, that's what, that's what I'm into. I'm into the feeling, right? And I don't need to, I know it. Listen, I got the greatest iSpire rig in the world if I want to take it to Mars, right? But I need to know how to operate in certain things that I want to do. And I believe that this plant, when you learn your own endocannabinoid system, and it's through trial and error, but this plant you'll respect because you'll overdo the edible once, right? And then you'll figure out, and that's why with my edibles too, which I'm so proud of, if you get your hands on them, individually wrapped, low dosage, and it's easy to share because I want everybody to be able to baby step their way into it. There's so much great product out there at the high level with everybody trying to get that's great. I mean, I'm the one in there, like here, Michigan grown, one of my favorites. There it is, the Kush Mints. Yes. You can always get me with Kush Mints too. But like, there's so much great flower. It's just, I know that on a medicinal level, when I look at my flower, and because if you go into any of the dispensaries, you look at the price point. Mine is very affordable price point, and that's not because it's not good weed, right? People look at the tea. It's about educating people properly, right? And that's why I always say, don't tell me it's Kush Mints. Tell me it's Michigan grown Kush Mints. Tell me it's PinCanna. So, tell me it's Franklin Fields. Tell me it's, that's how, and it's about education too. And you know what? I come by that humbly because it's conversations that I've learned surrounded by people like Rick and Josh and everything else.
Yeah. Well, you're a 4-time Stanley Cup champion. I'm sure Josh has a question or two for you to throw at you there, Darren. Go ahead, Josh.
I do. I've got some questions about sleep, because I think that's a really important point to pain. A lot of recovery happens during that sleep process. And if you can't get your brain to actively shut up, you'll never get there. A lot of people have tried CBD and it never got there because their brains are still activated. It doesn't allow them to really fully rest and fall asleep. They'll sit there and lay there for hours. You mentioned, I was going to ask you, and then I think you maybe answered it, and maybe you can elaborate on it. With CBN, you don't have to have the entourage effect. If some people are worried about THC, they're freaking out. So what is this CBN you're talking about?
So CBN is the sedative part of the plant. And actually, if the plant grows, like if you let it, you leave it in flower longer, it will go into a sort of CBN state, right, Rick? I'm not talking anything out of what we've learned. And it's the sedative part of the plant. So it's your sleep agent for your endocannabinoid system. So the fact is that just like CBD, but what the CBN does, and here's the brilliant part of it. And it makes sense because our endocannabinoid systems have been depleted. Why? Because back in the 30s, when the crops stopped eating the grass that had the hemp, then we stopped eating the chicken that had. So our systems are depleted. Now we're getting more CBD into it, right? Which helps with your appetite. It helps with your pain relief and different things like that. But the CBN specifically is the sedative. What this will do, and you only need a small amount. I think that my gummies are at like 2 milligrams but they're combined with the CBD. So what the CBN, I find that it does, and that's why in the Darren McCarty brand, I cross the CBN and the CBD for the people, because I'm always looking for the people that are not into the THC or scared of that word. That's okay. I'll get you there as long as it's a plant, but you might not need it. So the fact that the CBN and what it does, you're talking about your thoughts, it doesn't put you to sleep. What it allows you to do is when you want to go to sleep, it will take all the jumbling. And in my case, and this is, I've talked to many people, it sort of flattens it out and it makes one track. So then there's one thought and one, and next thing you know, you're out. What I was always told is you want to have a minimum of 4 hours of sleep, but that 4 hours of sleep, you're going to get more REM and you're going to get more, like you're talking about, healing, and to be able to do it. And here's the one thing to some people that have the feedback that I have is that they didn't have to get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night like a lot of us do, right? Which is a blessing in disguise. Now, there's also too part of my gummy, the gummy line, which has CBD, it has THC CBD, the game day, which are the day use, straight THC. It has CBN THC. That's for if you're looking, if you're looking for like, you haven't slept, but you know you need a recovery sleep, and say you can sleep in on the next day, and you're like, man, I hate getting up at 8 a.m. I could sleep in till 10. Well, it'll help you stay asleep a little bit longer. And it's all trial and error to what your individual system is, but it works. It works. I prefer the CBN CBD ones, even over the ones with the THC. I know how to fill the system up on the THC, right? I just don't want to know how to shut it down. And it's just something that's like so important, because I always believe it's sort of like I always say Inception, the movie Inception. But if you control the sleep world or the dream world or whatever, if everybody woke up and no matter if they had to deal with life, they had a good night's sleep, they're going to be a little bit nicer to each other, right? Isn't that cannabis at work? Like that's the whole thing. Like I always believe that this plant, if we don't destroy the world before, this plant has always been here to save the world. You know, I happen to have some. I have some Vlasic Labs CBN right here, and I just wanted to show our viewers who may be unfamiliar with when it's separated out as a separate cannabinoid,
I don't know how well you can see that, but it's just a powder. That's all. It's easily dabbed. It's easily added to a joint. So the way that you take CBN can be incorporated into the regular way that you use cannabis on a normal basis. So I just wanted to share that, Josh. Go ahead with your next question.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, hockey is so brutal. Aside from the UFC, it's the only, I think, pro sport where you can get in a fight. And so I just imagine all of the ailments that happens. And to your point, Darren, I never get sober after THC and say, oh my God, I'm sober. But when that for me, CBG, cannabigerol, when the anti-inflammatory properties of CBG wear off, I'm like, whoa, we need some more powder, put that in my coffee. That's the first thing I do as I wake up. I have that in my coffee, powder, water, water soluble, flavorless. And that whole endocannabinoid system you keep talking about to get all of the whatever cannabinoids you need. If it's anxiety, do CBD. If you need to sleep, CBN. If you need anti-inflammatory, CBG, and the other 300 or whatever unknown cannabinoids we have, and all of that. So a retired hockey player, I would imagine you're going to need all of those things. So is that something you just sort of live by as a result of the pain that you've endured?
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Never knew you had the option to. What you're telling me right here is I'm putting it in because I could try it with my system. Mm-hmm. The beautiful thing about the endocannabinoid system is you're just responsible to get it in. It'll do what it's supposed to do. That's the beauty. It's like every other system you have in your body that works that. So it's your responsibility if you're using it medicinally and it's as a medicine to enhance your human experience, so to speak, then don't you want to be responsible? It's the same thing as why people go keto and go organic and do anything else. It's the when you look at it about fueling your system. If you're going to go out there and run a marathon and you're going to go out there and isn't this all part of you wanting to be better to yourself? For me, I beat the living crap out of myself more than I did anybody else in my life, from the inside, the outside, everything else. I didn't think I'd make it to 50, but I didn't think I was lost for so long on a purpose to live. Well, I have my purpose. I have my passion because I want. And my brain always operates to me that day before somebody out there. Now you got to do the work. I'm responsible for this, right? But God bless this plant, because here's the thing. The more we communicate, the more you guys have shows like this, the more that I can tune in. And I have a saying, don't tell me what, tell me who, right? They're my who's. I get the education. I look at the CBGs. To mention that, I have in the Pink Canna strain, and there's the strain out there, it's called Miss Elizabeth. Now, this is only an 8% THC, 12% CBD. I call it the Iron Man suit, because you can get as torqued as you want, or I can, and sort of then I got to do something where I got to collect myself. I'll hit a Miss Elizabeth a few times, and it's like you put the Iron Man suit on, Tony Stark style, and you're just a little bit off the ground. So you don't come back to earth, but you're just right there where we all want to operate. I always look at it like people want to operate. If everybody's operated on mini hoverboards, then they're vibrate, right? So then they're feeling the vibration of what this experience is all about. You feel it when you're at a cannabis event. There's a vibration there because it's the wholesomeness of people there for the same positive reasons. So yeah, I love that. And CBG is another one. There's all these new ones that they start getting out with. The more the merrier, because it can only help and it can only educate us.
The regulators like to refer to CBN and CBG as novel cannabinoids, but I'd like to think of them as part of that beautiful ensemble effect that we talk about, that wonderful spectrum that you get when you're smoking actual full flower. However, being able to specifically dial in exactly what you need in order to satisfy what you're experiencing at that particular moment, that's the beauty of the plant, right?
I look at it like a symphony.
Yeah.
Like the largest symphony and the cannabinoids are all, some of them play similar instruments. Maybe there's this section here, but if you can listen in to the harp player when it's that spot, or they're all playing together at different, but isn't that the beauty of it? Isn't that novel? Who's this? Introduce me to this guy. See if they want to play some old timer hockey or something.
Oh man,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I was mentioning you just a few moments ago before we came on air that Darren is actually a two-sport athlete, that after he completed his career in hockey, he's now decided at his age to go into the world of wrestling, Darren, right?
Well, I don't want to do it. It's just sometimes they make me. So I'm more behind the scenes. A lot of it, Rick, to it, though, and especially in the Michigan indie scene and all the best ones. And, I talked to this because Harpo's tomorrow night, Saturday night, May 7th, is we're having Body Count, which is bringing in one of the biggest cards. And it's the hardcore deathcore guys. And everybody learned something or fell into something, I think, or fell back into something during COVID. I captured deathmatch wrestling. And to get to know these guys and a lot of these people behind it, it's the same sort of thing. And with me, that's where I focus, not only like sponsored with the brand, but the product, the CBD. Every wrestler's got the roll-on that comes through. Everybody gets, if they need the gummies and stuff like this, it's to let them know, like I said, I want to be known around here that you can have this conversation. Because why? Because the great people of this state, have made it this way, have fought for it this way. I mean, that's why I'm alive. So the fact that, like the fact that we're here, and that's really the underlying, I guess, double-edged sword or whatever else. So, hey, Rick, if I got to take a tube to the head or go through a door or whatever like this, whatever it takes for the plant. Remember, it's all about getting that plant love out there.
I love that. That is fantastic. If I have to crash through a door for cannabis, I'll do it, says Darren McCarty.
I will, baby. I will. That's not even a question.
Josh, we're almost finished with our segment with Darren. Do you have anything else you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I would like to know how many people in the NHL use THC, because back then we didn't know about other cannabinoids like CBD. So how many of them were open, or at least that of at least consuming?
That wasn't an open thing. I could say I probably had, and it wasn't a teammate in Calgary. That was as much as, but it was like dude, you could do everything else, but it was like, this was so like taboo because we grew up like, if you smoke, you never make it to the NHL. You could drink as much booze as you wanted, or have some party lines, or get into anything you wanted that way, but don't ever smoke a joint, because that you just ruin it. And it's just crazy because that's the propaganda. And I lived by that until I found the secret, and then that was the alternative, and then I fought against it. And I'm glad that things are evolving so that guys can be educated. And see, here's the thing, because if you told me as a player that I couldn't have THC, but I could have CBD and CBN, I'd be good with that during the season. You'd have to let me smoke it legally in the off season, but during the season, I would be fine with that. Because you don't want to, and here's the thing, guys don't want to get high. Guys don't get high before they play, or like some guys, now, but I'm retired. But like the whole thing is, you don't even think about that. It's more of a recovery thing. It's more of to shut your brain down, to go after you played. Nothing like smoking a joint on your drive home after a big playoff win with the window down in the spring. Like that was cool. But you did it to chill out, so you didn't have to go to the bar and drink a million beers.
That's fantastic. You know, recently,
In fact-
we just have a couple minutes left, but recently you reunited with Claude Lemieux. One of the most famous fights in hockey was Darren McCarty versus Claude Lemieux, revenge match for what happened to Drapes. Did you happen to discuss cannabis use at all? Because you're so famous for it nowadays.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. And the beauty is like to see all the, like a lot of the guys, but it's the can of curiosity and at least the CBD and the CBD roll on. That's where it starts. You know, like that's the whole thing. I create the CBD gummies are the inside version of what the roll on is on the outside version. And it gets the conversation because guys are set in their ways and different things, but you just want to be like, I think everybody knows that I'm always available as far as, and I do have guys that reach out to me that I played against, or, you know, to when they have cannabis curiosity or direction or stuff like this. So it's great to see. It really is, and I'll always be that way, and I'll always have, you know, a door open for all those conversations, no matter, you don't have to be an athlete or not, anybody.
Just another way Darren McCarty advocates for the plant. 4-time Stanley Cup Award winner Darren McCarty, thank you very much for joining Green Rush Live today with myself and Josh Kincaid. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Darren.
You bet, buddy. Thanks for everything, and I appreciate you, and thanks for doing this show because you know, I know it means a lot to me, but it means a lot of people everywhere.
Thank you, Darren.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, you know, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, you know, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it could make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems. Whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Welcome back to the Green Rush, the business of cannabis. We are a 2-hour weekly live cannabis business talk show produced by Pro Cannabis Media, broadcasting every Friday from 4 to 6. We discuss news, issues in the cannabis market, and each week we conduct a deep dive into specific topics of the industry. I'm Rick Thompson with Josh Kincaid, and this week's theme is athletes in cannabis. We've enjoyed Anna Simmons, we've enjoyed Darren McCarty, and now we are ready for our last guest, Lofa Tatupu. Welcome to the program.
Fellas, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And could you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your history with cannabis?
Yeah, Lofa Tatupu, second generation NFL. My dad played 14 years in the National Football League. I played 6. Would have been longer, but shortened by injuries, as is the case with a lot of us. I got into the cannabis industry 2014, really on as an investment and in the real estate side. It ended up taking over operations with my partner and developing the brand 1937 Farms in the I-502 legal recreational cannabis industry. And so some expertise in brand and bringing that to life, as well as operations, and then spun off and created, because of the impact that, not just cannabis, but also hemp and CBD, hemp-derived CBD has it's put me back together, mind, body, and soul, which I think that's a common thread you'll hear from a lot of athletes, and all the trauma that we've, experienced is it's pulled us out of that and made us whole again. And it's incredible what the plant is done for us and is doing for so many others. And so, that's, so to speak, my background. And from that, I spawned ZoneIn CBD, which is, our other business. And so that's this. We're now in our third year of business and changing lives, daily there too.
Excellent. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, time flies, man. 3 years since you've launched ZoneIn. That's pretty crazy. Pandemic, did you find that more people were going after CBD, or was it more of a THC world during that? Because it's the anxiety and everything else during that was pretty crazy. No one really wanted to smoke because they thought that would get them, that inhalables would be worse for COVID. What was your launching in a pandemic is crazy. When you look at like Heinz steak sauce, they launched during the Civil War. Like, who says, hey, that's a great idea, we need steak sauce right now? That wasn't necessarily your path. You did it before, but when you get hit with that, how do you continue to pivot to endure all of that? How was that process over the last 3 years?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? I mean, any business is, and especially when you're faced with, coming to life in a new industry. One that we're still in the infant years. And you're right. I think THC will probably always be king. Everybody loves THC. Even the people that they don't outwardly express or share it, let it be known. Everybody loves THC. And I think it is for everybody in the right dosage. But yeah, we launched really at the beginning of 19. So well before, almost like 10 months before, it was, COVID-19 became a thing and happened, and then 2020, and like you said, just in a blink of an eye, like a whole year, 2 years goes by, right? And it's been 3 that we've been in this business, but and it's been a wild ride, but it's been great. And I think really the pivot, really just we had to, no pun intended, zone in on, e-commerce rather than attacking the retail, which was, I think, really where a lot of people got hurt, was that launched during the pandemic was they went straight to the retail. Well, getting onto the shelves just half the battle. You got to get off that shelf too. And so I think, having the right customer journey, through email marketing and everything else and social media, and just hitting on the right messages on what it could do for you and what it is. I think a lot of things people they're curious, right? They're like, oh, what is it? And so cutting through the noise, because of course there's some bad players out there. Some people. I think there's a research done by one of the main television broadcasts out here. They pulled a bunch of products off of a retail shop and they tested them, with one of the big testing agencies out here. And it was like 70% of them didn't have the amount of CBD, and some didn't have any CBD in their products. And so, people are trusting you with their health. This isn't like a T-shirt or something else where you might be able to, with a big brand, you might be able to get away without quality, but this is supposed to change lives, as it has for me. And so we, on top of third-party testing, we even take the raw and go and test it again on our own to make sure of the quality that's in our bottles. And so in a long way there, it's been a crazy year or two, and navigating the challenges of COVID, but just still impacting lives, and not a day goes by that I don't get like an email or a message of someone saying that, hey, I took it for this, I took it for, pain relief, and it did this for me, and I know it's anecdotal, but it's curing another condition that they didn't know that it would do. So, I mean, it's incredible. And there's a lot of ways to go before we can definitively tell them everything that it does for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're eating the food that you're cooking too. So this is a product that you're passionate about because you're using it, and it could have maybe extended your career. You're with the Seattle Seahawks. You were a brutal linebacker for the 2005 to 2012 season. You don't look it, but you're shorter than I thought you would be. But you're a wide dude. Like, I don't know how you move the way you do. Like, it's not like Refrigerator Perry. Like, it's not like that. But you're a wide guy. You're a big dude. So I would imagine you got in a way because you're like in everybody's way, and you got beat up a lot. You had a torn pec, I think was the final straw, and that kind of destroyed that pretty much ended your career. Had you used CBD though, do you think you could have bounced back from that?
Oh man, I would have got so many. I'm 39 right now. I'm doing things that I couldn't do when I was 29. And because of because it acts on our cells, right? Not just talking about CB1 and CB2, but just the response that my mind and body have. They are so connected, so in sync, that I feel on a different level, a more aware, more zoned in, more heightened awareness of what's going on inside my body as opposed to just what was outside. Even like, and I'd argue that the pec, while it was my last surgery or injury. I had 10 over 7 years. I had 15 plus concussions. I argue that the last concussion I suffered a year prior, I still hadn't fully recovered from, and I argue that my mind muscle connection was so thrown off that when I strained it, I could have still played through it had I had the CBD. I could have played through and not torn the pec all the way. A full rupture is what I suffered. I tore both of them. The other one I tore in 2009 in a game, and that sat me out for the rest of that season. It was crazy, but we, as on your podcast before, Josh, we spoke. I feel like it has made me a better athlete at 39 years old than I was at the prime of my career when I was going to the Pro Bowl and I was an all-pro middle linebacker. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's power, man.
So right now the NFL is actually starting to look into it because they wouldn't allow for THC. CBD is helping a lot, but do you think that more people are using, because there's a lot of people who are using it and trying not to get busted and tested. Is the NFL as a league finally starting to loosen their grip on that with this new research that they're doing? Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, I haven't gotten the full details of it. I know they set aside $1 million for research, but I haven't found out where that actual money is going to, like what to research. I did hear from a friend that it was actually going towards like research for rugby players, which I'm like, I know there's some similarities there, but it should probably be on, either your former players or current players. That's what I would hope. But yeah, man, it's tough in THC. Absolutely, there's guys using, and NFL, they have the testing protocol, right? It starts on 420. That's a very obvious time to start your testing protocol.
That's funny.
And if you don't get selected, then it kicks the can down. You're going to get tested. So it's essentially back open, the window's open, and you'll get tested. You're definitely going to get tested on the 1st August or whatever you get to camp. And so it's, the NFL, I do appreciate at least them letting you know when the testing is going to be. So I think, they're really trying to catch anybody with a problem. But here's the thing. I don't know anybody that smokes or uses cannabis regularly that's a high achiever like that really has a problem with cannabis. It's the other things that are a problem, and I'm talking even alcohol, not even just the stuff that's illegal, the opioids and the other drugs, but alcohol. It's just odd that, there would be such a firm stance on cannabis. And I know it's still not fully legal everywhere, and I'm hoping that's the only thing that's holding them back. But, we've seen other leagues, take a more aggressive stance on safety for their players.
Mm-hmm.
We've had other guests today talk about CBN and CBG, some of the other cannabinoids. Have you tried to integrate any of those into your personal treatment program? And is there any plan for you to launch something like that commercially? Yeah,
we so CBN and we work with doctors and specialists in the formulation to further the education of this stuff. So, but yeah, as far as CBN, there's some trace amounts of CBN in some of our products, and CBG I have not seen show up as a minor on most of our products, but we did add it as an isolate on top into our muscle rub for pain cream, and it's been very effective. And so yeah, I think it's kind of like CBD isolate. It's good, but it's got limited benefits. It's all the synergistic effects of all of them working together of where you're going to get the most, complete treatment. And but as more information comes to light, and as the scientists and the doctors that we work with, mention or say, hey, this is what's been proven to be effective. I, of course, am the guinea pig. And every product that we've released, we've only got four products, I think. And every one I had to test for 3 to 6 months, by itself. It's all right, I'm not going to take anything but this to make sure of the effectiveness. And, because like I said, when it's in your system and the reaction it's had for me, I feel on a completely different level, even just from the food I put into my body these days. It's insane how, receptive or non-receptive my body is. It's your body will speak to you if you listen to it. For so long without CBD, I couldn't hear it. I couldn't. And of course, the brain injuries, the concussions didn't help.
Mm-hmm. Is anybody using it to wean off of smoking? Because I noticed when I did Sober October, I used ZoneIn for that whole month. And I was surprised. I didn't think about smoking cannabis hardly at all. It was kind of shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I guess not completely kill the appetite, but curb it a little. And I noticed for me, something I never thought I would get rid of. I chewed tobacco from the time I was 16 until I was 35. And, I thought I tried so many times to get off of it and stop. Almost in unison with taking CBD, I noticed that the edge or the stress was not there to crave it. And, and oftentimes those things, they always cause more stress. I noticed after I had a chew, I would be more tense in my shoulders and my jaw and my body. And I realized I was overstressing myself, but there's a lot of my friends who have not just, there's stories of opioid, getting off of opiates, getting off of, sleep meds. In fact, I don't use sleep meds. I did most of my career. That was something that to get the proper rest. And it's replaced all that on top of Tylenol, aspirin, and all the other anti-inflammatories that were often, given to us.
What about a protocol in the NFL to utilize CBD to wean the NFL, like wean people off of fame? I would imagine that when you have like this, you're in a crowd of 60,000 people, and that kind of adrenaline comes with its own drug. And when you no longer have that platform, I would imagine depression and other things can set in. Do you think that it would be a decent protocol to incorporate CBD to kind of get over that and have some kind of a group to help, transition through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something in the works. I can't really talk too much about it, but, wellness clinics down the road is something that I'm working, very hard on with my group. And, it would be kind of a decompression where it's like a protocol. Okay, it's over. You go here, and now, it's a safe place where, you're going to hear stories from former players, other guys that are going through the stuff you're going through, and you could just kind of figure out or make some peace with anything that you're going through. And because for the longest, especially in our profession of football, no one wanted to talk about it. Like, right? I'm going to deny it. It's just stay in denial the whole time. So I think it's very important. And, it is a drug, man, that adrenaline rush. You're not going to get that anywhere else. I'll tell you right now. And I tell all the guys when I was coaching, I was like, hey, soak it up, because when it's over, it's over. And I would say my personal story wasn't so much tied to an identity crisis but the depression and, anxiety and all the stuff that I left the game with was more so from, not knowing what was going on in my body and mind from all the surgeries, the concussions. And I wish, luckily I say, it was here before me. CBD found me. And I think everybody finds it, cannabis and hemp found me. And I think everybody finds it when they need to, when it's right for them. And I'm grateful that it did, because it made me whole, man. It made me the best version. I think that's what life's all about, is everybody trying to become the best version of themselves. Right. And that's what it's really done for me. And it's been doing for so many other people. And so I'm just here to try to be a messenger and a soundboard and just keep singing his praises, as many times as I can.
Power and celebrity can be very, very intoxicating drugs that may be very difficult to get off of, right?
Yeah. And then, but I think it's gonna take some high achieving, no pun intended, but business people to come forward and really be an advocate for the world to take it serious, because the celebrity or the sports figures, that's great. They're famous, they got attention. But, when someone, a high ranking official that's just kicking ass, and, someone that's in a position of power that's just dominating life, and, when they come forward and an advocate for it, I think that's some real heads to turn.
Elon Musk smoking online or smoking on television wasn't good enough, though, right? I mean,
did he know he was smoking? That's where I get confused, because it seemed like he was confused as to what he was smoking.
Yeah, I thought so too. It seemed more like a staged incident than anything else. But we do have some very famous Carl Sagan, some of the folks that have been really at the top of their worlds that have been confirmed cannabis users and really supported that for a long time. But, the war on drugs makes people deny. They deny things that they see right in front of their own eyes. They deny their own bodily experience when they have those things. How difficult is it talking to people who haven't experienced cannabis yet and trying to convince them to give these type of medicines a try?
I think the biggest thing is, rather than, trying to force it on anybody, just show them that you're living your best life. I mean, lead by example. And then when they're curious, that's when they start asking questions. And then you still don't force it on them. You say, this is what it's done for me, and I think that's the biggest thing about the hemp derived and just the CBD play. I believe it's the bridge to everybody taking a harder look at cannabis as a solution. And even you said it, war on drugs and you brought up Anna, my good friend. She has the coolest Instagram handle of all time. It's called Exit Drug, because yeah, isn't that cool? So
it is cool. It's great.
We're all brought up told that, oh, hey, cannabis is the gateway drug. Bullshit, man. Oh, can I swear?
You can.
Okay. It's bullshit, man. It's bullshit. And in fact, this is the plant that's going to save us all. And I just thought, I even told when I met her, I was like, yo, that is the coolest handle, or nickname ever. Because it is. It's been, there's so many anecdotally, right? But stories that I have of people with whether it's addiction, alcohol, or opiates, or sleep meds, myself, and other stuff. There are so many that have said, hey, I turned to cannabis and I don't take that anymore. It's so cool for her to just even spin the narrative of a gateway drug to an exit drug. I just thought that was one of the dopest things I ever seen.
It's funny because when I got interviewed for Reader's Digest about this basis space. I think I told you about this a couple of years ago, Lofa. When people responded to me, a lot of older folks that still read Reader's Digest, who would ask me about, well, what CBD did you use? And I would tell them, this transdermal patch or whatever, but you might want to look at the entourage effect. And I would mention, THC, and then never heard from them again. So it's challenging. Anytime you have to educate and then sell a product, that's one thing. But even if you're just focused on educating, it's hard to get through. So using CBD as kind of the gateway into, dropping seeds literally and just let them form and develop and grow on their own. It's kind of just what you have to do sometimes.
But okay, now I'm just going to venture to guess that the Reader's Digest demographic is a little bit older than us, fellas.
Yeah.
So in their lifetime, hell, in my lifetime, I didn't think I'd see cannabis legalized. I didn't believe it. I didn't think it would happen. I'd hoped, but man, a lot of work is taking place to get to this point. And I think the fact that everyone's starting to see just how much good is coming from it, it's going to continue to go. But, so I always take that into account when I think about the older generations that, for the longest, it was so stigmatized, it was so vilified that, if you, and the stigma, you're a stoner, you unproductive, you're going to make the bad choices in life. Man, get out of here with that nonsense.
You've probably had to live with it for a while. I know I did. Did you have to deal with the dumb jock stereotype?
Hell yeah. And I had the dumb jock and the stoner stigma thrown my way in high school. I was like, wait a minute. So, it's just, but the labels, right? Again. And so it is what it is. But yeah, it was definitely, I had both of those because, I hung out with everybody. I didn't care. I just, whoever was cool, and by cool, they don't have, they have their shit figured out. They are happy and content with their existence and their being. And, I'm just like, I vibrate on that level, man. I dig it. Cool. Some people just, I think they were scared by it, people that were quick to use those labels and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right now, you're dealing with two different kind of businesses. You have the 1937 farms in Washington under the 502 regulations, and then you have the legal CBD unit that is ZoneIn. That's got to be kind of frustrating because at one level, you can't really expand, scale, or get out of Washington with this farm unless you partner and do some genetics and. It's two totally different business models. How do you get your brain to sort of dissect and execute on that? Or do you just know that 1937 Farms is what it is? And I don't know. How do you deal with it?
Well, no, I think, several pioneers, the brand is everything in anything you do. And I think, you look at cookies, they're not, they're taking their brand everywhere, and it's not them just doing the heavy lifting, but they've done such a beautiful job with the brand that it resonates and it's moved everywhere, even internationally. And so while we are stuck to Washington as for the THC side of things, this is we're having fun. So it's a lifelong thing. It's a long picture, long view type of thing, and like type of play. And we're just having fun with it, and helping watch people live better lives. And we'll see what goes. But yeah, there's always, you could always do licenses deals, or license out the brand to another, where we could partner on several things to make their learning curve a lot easier, because I know it was a lot, man. Man, it's I mean, we're still learning every day in that industry. But and then yeah, obviously from ZoneIn, the CBD side of things, it's been a lot easier in terms of, we're not limited to a certain place, but also then, you could get a little distracted with trying to be everything to everybody. Right. So, and I'm grateful for everybody that does try ZoneIn, that believes in it. And because it was really, what we made it for was the demographic of athletes. And we believe as a company, that movement's our best medicine, and CBD is just there to help us recover. Now I know CBD and even cannabis is a great medicine, and but not everybody's willing to accept that, right? So if you just put the message out there that we want you to move for you, and then we'll help you recover, a lot of people have been receptive to that.
Now, we're almost finished with our segment. How can people find this wonderful products that you've been talking about today?
Yeah, e-commerce site at zoneincbd.com. And you can find me on Instagram. I'm still terrible at doing personal shout outs. Lofa _Tatupu. I'm mostly on Instagram. I got a Twitter too, but yeah. And it's I just want to say thank you guys for everything, for having me. Josh, always a pleasure, man, and I hope you guys stay blessed.
Likewise, man. Thank you.
Thanks for showing up today. We appreciate it. And thanks for being an advocate for the plant.
Appreciate it, Lofa.
All right, fellas. Take care.
Well, that's it for today's broadcast for the Green Rush, the business of cannabis. I'm Rick Thompson, along with host Josh Kincaid. We hope you've enjoyed the time today. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, Stephen Hoffman, Massachusetts Cannabis Commission czar, resigns 4 months early. Plus, the U.S. government says basketball star Brittany Griner is being wrongfully detained by the Russian government after busting her for carrying a vape pen with hash oil. Huh? It is still a federally illegal substance in the U.S., right? President Biden's administration continues to get pressure for cannabis reform. Plus, a bad week for MSO Acreage Holdings. That $600 million lawsuit can proceed, and board member John Boehner gets accused of stealing data from a lobbyist. And pop quiz, Starbucks or cannabis? Which one had more sales in the U.S. last year? We'll tell you on We Talk News next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. In our top story this week, it seems the Biden administration may be changing its mind about incarceration over cannabis, at least if you're an Olympic athlete being detained overseas. This week, ESPN reported that the Department of State has determined that the Russian Federation has wrongfully detained U.S. citizen Brittany Griner. This, of course, over the singular concentrate cartridge that was found in a piece of Griner's luggage while traveling through Russia. This is great news for Griner, but it begs the question why the feds aren't doing the same thing for U.S. citizens locked up here at home. Leafly's Brett Barcott penned a column tackling the conversation, who asked the public to put Biden's feet to the fire and to support causes like the Last Prisoner Project, which is actively fighting to free people locked up. So while the feds go back and forth on who shouldn't be behind bars for weed, there could be some movement in Congress. Senators on both sides of the aisle are throwing support behind a proposal to tuck key banking legislation into a larger bill. Safe banking legislation was featured in the House's version of the Competes Act, which passed in February. And Senator Patty Murray now says she is fighting every which way to get the cannabis legislation included in a final version of that bill. So let's take a closer look at what else is happening in DC with Vote Pro Podcast's Phil Adams.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC report. A GOP House member issued a scathing rebuke of President Biden over his administration's failure to pursue the cannabis reforms that he campaigned on. On a recent episode of his podcast, Firebrand, Florida Republican Matt Gaetz referred to the president as a, quote, recalcitrant boomer, saying Biden has yet to fulfill his 2020 campaign pledge to federally decriminalize cannabis and expunge the records of nonviolent cannabis offenders. Gaetz urged the president to, quote, do what you said you would do, and by the stroke of the president's pen, we could have substantial marijuana reform in this country. Gaetz is one of only 3 Republican House members to vote in favor of ending the federal cannabis prohibition. The Food and Drug Administration has stepped up enforcement action regarding the synthetic cannabinoid Delta-8 THC. This week, the FDA sent out letters to companies that market products containing Delta-8, warning them against making unsanctioned claims about its therapeutic benefits. The compound derived from legal hemp is especially popular in states where cannabis remains illegal because of the relative lack of laws that specifically prohibit it. The FDA says products claiming Delta-8 can treat or alleviate a range of conditions such as cancer, multiple sclerosis, and anxiety are unapproved and violate federal rules. You've heard the running joke about a Starbucks on every corner? Well, even the coffee mega giant can't compete with cannabis. According to the 2022 MJ Biz Fact Book, U.S. sales of legal cannabis beat out Starbucks coffee by about 1/3. That's despite the fact that coffee can be sold in all 50 states, whereas cannabis is only legal in 39 states. While Starbucks generated revenues of about $20.5 billion in 2021, medical and adult use cannabis sales racked up between 24 and 27 billion. That also eclipsed sales of opioids, over-the-counter pain relievers and sleep aids, and even salty snacks. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Another image blow for corporate cannabis. Former House Speaker John Boehner is notoriously unpopular with the legacy community, having spent most of his political career locking people up for cannabis, only to turn around a short time later and join the executive board at Etheridge Holdings. Well, now Boehner is facing a bombshell lawsuit that doesn't bode well for the board's image. He had recently been exploring a deal to join a pro-cannabis lobbying group, but he apparently backed out of the deal. And this lawsuit accuses him of stealing data and talking points from that group before moving on to form a lobbying outfit of his own. We'll have to watch what happens with that lawsuit. But for now, let's see what else is happening in the business world with Deborah Borchardt and the Green Market Report.
I'm Deborah Borchardt, and this is the business update for Weed Talk News. I'm reporting to you today from the United Nations, if you can believe that. I'm at a regenerative cannabis conference that's being held here at the UN, so that's really amazingly exciting. Having said that, there's a lot going on in New York this week. There's the Luxury Meets Cannabis Conference today and tomorrow, and then Saturday is the Cannabis Parade in New York City. But besides the stuff happening in New York, we had a lot happening in the cannabis industry on the business side. So this week we got earnings from big names like Scott's Miracle-Gro, Weed Maps, and Green Thumb Industries. Now, Scott's Miracle-Gro reported that their hydroponic segment, Hawthorne, saw the sales drop. Now, they've been warning about this for a couple of quarters, but it really happened. They said they don't expect hydroponics to recover until the end of 2022. Weed Maps had an excellent report. That company, I feel like they're making money hand over fist. They're doing good, all good over at Weed Maps. GTI, listen, they had a pretty good quarter considering the headwinds that they were facing. They're dealing with rising costs, prices falling, but on a positive note, they were one of the first companies to be able to sell adult use cannabis in New Jersey. And so those numbers are going to hit the next quarter. And I think it's going to be all good for GTI from here on out. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt with the business update for We Talk News.
Massachusetts' top cannabis regulator is giving up his position early. The Boston Globe reports the state's Cannabis Control Commission chairman, Steve Hoffman, resigned from his position last week, months before his term was set to come to an end. And with a closer look at what's next for the Bay State, here's Ron Marshalsea.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The state's Cannabis Control Commission has been without a chairperson for a week, and the agency acknowledged Monday that Chairman Stephen Hoffman resigned from the job effective April 25th. According to WBUR local coverage, it is still unclear why the CCC went a week without acknowledging the resignation of its chairman. Treasurer Deborah Goldberg, who appointed Hoffman to the CCC, will now be charged with appointing Hoffman's successor. Root and Bloom, a cannabis cultivation, extraction, and manufacturing operation, announced Thursday that the board of directors has unanimously chosen Tom Reagan to be chief executive officer. New CEO Tom Reagan was quoted as saying, "Root and Bloom sits at the forefront of one of the most exciting new market opportunities in our country. I look forward to working with the team to develop products and brands that resonate with customers, and together we will unlock the potential in the Massachusetts cannabis industry and drive growth that benefits employees, shareholders, and the communities in which we operate." Tom Reagan was president of Mindful TR Concentrates in Colorado, and under his leadership, the business scaled from $4 million in annual revenue to over $30 million in the highly competitive Colorado cannabis market. And finally, Ayer Wellness Incorporated, a U.S. multi-state cannabis operator, announced Wednesday they have expanded the product that is available in Massachusetts with the addition of its premium flower brand, Kind. Kind sales began in Massachusetts on April 29th, exclusively at Sierra Naturals dispensaries. Each unique strain included in the initial launch, Mr. Nasty, Orangutan Skittles, and Fresh Squeezed, according to the company, boast a premium genetic profile and will be made available to the broader adult use market in the near future. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
Efforts to make adult use cannabis in New Hampshire a reality may not be dead yet. While the state Senate recently voted down 2 bills for legalization, Democratic Representative Tim Egan says representatives are still working hard to keep up with the Granite State's neighbors in New England.
So now we're sending it back to the Senate. What the best part about this is that it does not go to the Senate floor and have to be voted on. It goes to what they call committee of conference, which means the Senate passed a bill, the House passed a bill. Both of those bills passed are a little bit different, so we sit down at the table and we negotiate them. So New Hampshire is going to look at those states and say, other states are doing things that we're missing, and we're going to lose out. We're going to lose investors, we're going to lose entrepreneurs, we're going to lose people that want to come here and run businesses who might be of diverse background, and they look for the advantage. A smart business person looks for the advantage. And if Massachusetts has a financial tool that helps fund those that have been disadvantaged, if Vermont is developing training programs with their state colleges to educate those that have been disadvantaged, then folks in New Hampshire are going to have to get on those same wavelengths. Otherwise, we'll be left out in the cold.
Next door in Vermont, legal weed sales could be postponed, but not for legal reason. The state's Cannabis Control Board says a staffing shortage will likely push back the start of sales, an additional postponement to what was supposed to be an operating market by October of last year. Jessie Lynn Dolan takes a closer look in this week's Vermont Report.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. The Vermont Cannabis Control Board approved the social equity status of 8 cultivator applications and approved 18 pre-qualification applications. However, due to a staffing shortage, they won't be issuing licenses for at least a few weeks. They also haven't received any applications from existing medical dispensaries for adult use integrated licenses. While the existing medical dispensaries were allowed by law to start selling adult use cannabis on May 1st, most don't expect to be ready until the fall. Vermont Normal is in the middle of a 5-week virtual fundraiser on Strava to support their legislative efforts. Fundraising participants in the Vermont Normal Strava Club are using the app to track their miles as they bike, run, walk, swim, skate, ski, and hike. Wilmington held a pre-town meeting informational hearing about their commercial cannabis article revote on Tuesday, May 10th. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Advocates in Missouri say they've collected nearly twice as many signatures as they need to put the adult use cannabis on the November ballot. But some worry a GOP-controlled legislator could still stall those efforts. So let's check in with Brandon Jones for this week's Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones again from Distribution Maven with the Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And yeah, the legislature is really starting to heat up here in Missouri. So we had Representative Ron Hicks try to pass his movement to be, his bill to be pushed on this actual session for the legislature. And Monday it was pushed back when they were supposed to meet on it again. So that this session doesn't look like it's going to be able to happen here for Representative Ron Hicks. He still has less than 2 weeks, but he said he, is optimistic, but, is trying to be realistic at the same time. So he's calling for everybody out here that wants this to, be met in this session to come out and peacefully protest, to just be out there and say, hey, we want to be heard. This is something that we want to be, addressed in this session. At the same time, they actually released that it will be on the ballot in November for a different one of the bills. So out of Marijuana Moment, there's a story that the new bill will be put on the ballot in November. So this is, like I said, everybody's pushing back. There's a lot of time between now and November for a lot more things to be put on hold and much more amendments to be added. Right now, the bill that they're placing on the ballot in November calls for adult use. They can actually, all adults will be able to grow, possess, and actually sell cannabis here in the state of Missouri. So we'll see if that actually makes it to actually being, voted on here in November or not. On a little bit of a lighter note, one of the biggest MSO companies here is actually coming to Missouri now. So everybody knows of Cookies. So Cookies is now partnered with my buddies Sense Cannabis to cultivate for their product here in the state of Missouri. So one of the biggest MSOs, in the country is going to be here in Missouri as well too. So we'll see how that all incorporates here in the state. Again, I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven, the Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Have a great week. Stay medicated and educated, guys.
Lawmakers and advocates in Washington state sending another bold message to Congress about protecting cannabis businesses and their money. This week, the governor, attorney general, and other top officials sent a letter to congressional leaders emphasizing the urgent need to pass banking reform as a public safety imperative, particularly for Washington state. Josh Kincaid takes a closer look.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. A new survey of Washington voters found the majority support for an initiative that would decriminalize all drugs statewide, expunge criminal records for possession, and direct $141 million in revenue to outreach and recovery services. Generally speaking, most people in Washington who say they're concerned about substance use believe that criminalizing it has been a demonstrated failure and prefer a public health approach to addressing it. In 2001, Portugal decriminalized the personal possession of all drugs, which resulted in rates of drug use that have remained consistently below the EU average, drug-related deaths that have remained below average, and the proportion of prisoners sentenced for drugs has fallen from 40 to 15%. This could help Washington, where there were 3 fatal incidences involving a cannabis dispensary robbery in less than a week last month in the western part of the state. Next week, you guys will find out about Washington State's Cannabis Report. With that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Could Pennsylvania be feeling the pressure to legalize? A pair of bipartisan proposals suggest the Commonwealth may be closer to legalization than ever before. And with neighboring states like Maryland, New York, and New Jersey establishing their own private adult use cannabis markets, the Keystone State may want to strike while the iron is hot. Claudia Post has much more from Pennsylvania this week.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. Well, those of us in Pennsylvania are now surrounded by markets which have both recreational and adult use. So what is Pennsylvania feeling when Maryland, New York, and New Jersey have their own private adult use markets? It's going to take away from Pennsylvania. So the General Assembly, in its wisdom, took steps to learn more about recreational cannabis legalization. And there were a series of hearings. Now, my question is always, why didn't they do this before? Why didn't they educate themselves before? Because, as I always like to say, it's Philadelphia and Pittsburgh with Pennsylvania in between. Anyway, let's have fingers crossed for adult use, home grow, and the whole shooting match. Next up, now this really struck me as so self-serving. State Representative Danielo Burgos, a Democrat of Philadelphia, introduced legislation that would revoke medical cannabis licenses from entities with ties to Russian businesses. Now, friends, I don't know, is anybody investigating all of the cannabis industry in Pennsylvania? Has anybody dropped a dime on somebody who's gotten an investment from Russia? I don't know, because all I know is this person, Mr. Burgos, wants to get a name for himself, perhaps, and jumps on the bandwagon of searching out Russian businesses, because he says Russian businesses cannot profit from medical cannabis in Pennsylvania. Hey, he wants to revoke all their licenses for anybody that was in that, getting any funds from Russia. Okay. Next up is Pennsylvania House lawmakers filed a companion bill to a state-passed measure this week that would provide banking protections and state relief for marijuana businesses. And I say bravo, that's terrific. And considering I just made a comment about how Pennsylvania is very far-reaching and thoughtful. The state version was amended as it moved through the body before final passage. Both bills would provide state-level protections to banks and insurers that work with medical cannabis businesses in the Keystone State. However, the newer House bill also contained a provision concerning tax credits for eligibility for the market that was removed from the state measures in committee. So, of course, we always have things bouncing around the legislature, and I find it very frustrating. Why don't they just pass the damn bill and protect people who are in the marijuana industry, period. That's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From We Talk News, have a fabulous week.
Lawmakers in Florida seem to be getting fiery over cannabis legislation. On a recent podcast, Representative Matt Gaetz referred to President Biden as a recalcitrant boomer, criticizing the president for taking no action on his campaign promise of cannabis reform. And to add fuel to Florida's fire, Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried also called out the federal government this week, penning an op-ed for Marijuana Moment, in which she said the feds need to catch up to the industry's needs. Heather Allman takes a closer look at what's happening in Florida this week.
It's time for the weekly Florida report from We Talk News. I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report. Regulators are currently reviewing applications received from Black farmers for one highly sought-after license to grow cannabis in Florida. Last year, the Department of Health began moving forward to award the license, and the Office of Medical Marijuana Use accepted license applications between March 21st and 25th. Licenses were newly made available because of the Pickford class action lawsuit and the growing number of patients. But after 5 years, it's still unclear when a decision will be made on who will get the license. While the DOH won't say how many applications for the license targeted to Black farmers were received, a list was posted Thursday on the department website showing the names of 12 applicants with no additional information provided. Supposedly, the state's Office of Medical Marijuana Use is making sure submitted applications are not going to expose confidential and exempt information to the public. So for now, the wait continues. Just like other cannabis states, Florida has seen a huge increase in doctors, consumers, and dispensaries in the last few years, thanks in part to the pandemic. In fact, cannabis is one of the few industries in the world that grew during COVID. Home deliveries, more people looking for something to deal with stress, and cannabis being declared essential in the U.S. have all led to the steep market increase. And personally, I can't disagree that cannabis is indeed essential. Florida's patient numbers have soared since 2016, with the state's registry showing 713,000 people with approved ID cards as of April 29th. That's more than double the number in early 2020, and the number will only continue to steadily rise. In addition, hundreds of new doctors have become licensed to dispense cannabis, and a mere 22 companies have opened approximately 420 retail dispensary locations. Yes, you heard that right, 420. Since operating companies in Florida must be vertically integrated, the framework quickly produced some of major players like Trulieve, who has 115 locations and 600 different medical cannabis products for sale. No wonder they have a market share above 55% in the Sunshine State. And speaking of Trulieve, last week, Trulieve CEO was awarded the Green Market Report Women's Leadership Award in the C-Suite category. Green Market Report is a publication that focuses on the financial news of the rapidly growing cannabis industry, and its Women's Leadership Awards are meant to honor female and female-identifying cannabis professionals. Other award categories included activism, social equity, cultivation, and media. In selecting Rivers, the judges noted that she is the only female CEO of a publicly traded company in the cannabis industry, and they highlighted Trulieve's recent acquisition of Harvest Health and Recreation, brokered under Rivers' leadership. She was also instrumental in Trulieve's Environmental, Social, and Governance Report, which was the first of its kind from an American MSO. It covers the non-financial aspects of the business, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, which have become increasingly important to investors. Trulieve was one of the first 5 Florida companies in 2015 to be permitted to cannabis cultivate, and their business came fully online after Amendment 2 went into effect in January 2017. They have since opened locations across 11 states. And with Trulieve's purchase of Harvest for $2.2 billion last year, the Tallahassee-based company became the largest legal cannabis corporation in the nation. In response to the award, Rivers said, quote, "It's an honor to be recognized amongst so many talented leaders who are redefining this industry. I look forward to a future when female leadership is ubiquitous with the C-suite." That's a wrap for the We Talk News Florida Report. I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report, and I'm still impatiently waiting for a long overdue new license to be awarded.
Medical marijuana patients in Michigan may finally be seeing the kickback of falling cannabis prices. While the cost of medical weed seems to be dropping at the counter for consumers, small-time growers may now be the ones taking a hit. And regulators in the state have their eyes set on social equity education this week in order to help support those smaller businesses. With that, here's Michigan NORML Executive Director, Rick Thompson.
Hello again. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. A homeless man was arrested in Fort Wayne, Indiana, for selling cannabis and medibles on the street. In an unsurprising twist, he claims he bought them in Michigan and brought them over state lines to sell in his hometown. The 40-year-old man was arrested with 114 grams of cannabis and 3 packages of Monster gummies. He was apprehended in a traffic stop where it was discovered he had 2 outstanding warrants and was driving his 2009 Pontiac on a suspended license. Despite being homeless, he had $5,000 on him when arrested. He told officers he regularly makes a run for the border to bring back high THC items to the cannabinoid-deprived citizens of Indiana, and sometimes trades cannabis for places to sleep overnight. Fort Wayne police blame Michigan for their spike in cannabis flower and product seizures lately. Last year, they seized 122 pounds of cannabis and more than 8,700 edibles. Well, a man in Detroit bolted a cannabis vending machine to the side of his home and sold both cannabis and pills to anyone who walked up. So says the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who thought the idea was so rad, they went ahead and bought cannabis from the vending machine twice. This Detroiter had the machine in operation for the last 4 years, per the complaint. Now, we're making fun of the situation, but the suit alleges that the owner of the house and the machine sold narcotics and guns to kids. So it's not a very funny story at all. The homeowner is a felon and is not legally able to own guns, but had 18 of them in his possession when arrested. The man made up to $2,000 per day with the machine, and the government says he raked in more than $1.6 million over the 4-year period. He faces multiple charges from a variety of law enforcement agencies. In Genesee County, where I live, has notoriously been a place where cannabis freedoms have been respected. But that's not going to be the case for one woman in Clio. In August, she bought THC oil and made gummies from them, then put the gummies in a Lifesavers gummy package and hid them in her fridge. Her child recently found the gummies and brought them to Edgerton Elementary School, where multiple children shared the treats and became sick. The school was shut down and all the kids sent home as they investigated the cause of the illness. They initially suspected a gas leak until they learned about the gummies. Now, David Layton, county prosecutor, wants to charge the woman with a 10-year felony for second-degree child abuse, even though all the kids were fine and are back in school. Everyone agrees the incident was unintentional, but that hasn't stopped the authorities from laying big charges on the mom. It seems that an unfortunate accident can bring heavy consequence down upon cannabis consumers, even if they live in a place where canna tolerance has been part of the culture for more than a decade. Never forget that there are those people in power who are just waiting for a slip up, for a mistake, in order for them to revert back into prohibitionist days and prohibitionist ways. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
And finally, move over, corporate coffee. Cannabis is coming for your money. According to the 2022 MJ Biz Fact Book, regulated cannabis sales in the US have bubbled over, eclipsing sales at Starbucks across the country. The report says Starbucks revenue grew 25% during 2021, while legal cannabis sales climbed 30%. It's pretty incredible when you consider coffee is legal in all 50 states. But it looks like more people are now considering cannabis over caffeine. And why not? After all, it's a whole new world of weed out there, and remember to use it responsibly. That's it for Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto, reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. We'll see you next time.
Hi, my name's Tai Chang. I'm the president and founder of Aloha Green Apothecary in Hawaii. We're a vertically integrated medical cannabis company with 3 dispensaries, 1 extraction lab, and 1 cultivation center near the North Shore of Oahu. We have over 150 employees now, and we've been working with Adaptive HR to meet our human resource needs. We're super excited to work with them as we expand, and we've grown at least 2-3 times over the last 2 years. So we look forward to a good relationship with Adaptive, and come visit us in Hawaii anytime. Aloha.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your